Welcome to the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk KFYO. We start early this morning with our guest, and joining us on the phones this morning, I don't know if he's technically in quarantine or not. It's U.S. Senator Ted Cruz. Good morning, sir. How are you today?
Chad, good morning. Great to be with you.
Are you in quarantine? I've lost count because you've gone into quarantine at least twice. So are you in quarantine or out of quarantine right now?
So I am not quarantined right now, but I am sheltering at home like much of the rest of the state and much of the rest of the country.
Excellent. Well, I guess we'll start off with the news this morning. Sad news. As jobless claims last week, 6.6 million additional jobless claims. That's on top of the 3.2 million that we saw the prior week. Nearly 10 million Americans filing for jobless claims over the last 2 weeks. Senator, what's your reaction to that?
Well, the economic damages we're seeing right now are catastrophic, and we're facing two crises simultaneously. We've got a public health crisis that is the coronavirus pandemic, and that is serious, and we are working hard, and we will defeat this crisis. But we've got simultaneously an economic crisis that is caused by the public health steps that government is taking to try to defeat the public health crisis. And you're looking at millions and millions of Americans out of work. And it is, people are hurting. We have never seen anything like it. We're looking at millions of small businesses that have seen their customers disappear, that are on the verge of bankruptcy. And this has the potential, both on the public health side and on the economic side, to get substantially worse before it gets better.
How do you think the federal response has been so far? Well, as with any crisis, the response from government has been mixed. There have been aspects of it that have been good. There have been aspects of it that have been not so good. When you look at the public health crisis, one of the most important steps that were taken was early on, the president halted air travel into and out of China. And that happened back in January, right at the beginning of this outbreak, before the virus had made it to the United States in any significant number. And that decision at the time, the president and the administration were criticized for, the media criticized them for, Democratic politicians criticized the president for that. And I'll tell you, several weeks ago, I chaired a hearing on the coronavirus in the Senate and heard testimony from experts at the CDC, at the Department of Transportation, at Customs and Border Patrol. And all three of those experts testified that the president's decision to halt air travel into and out of China played an important role in limiting the spread of this disease and giving us more time to fight it. And had we not stopped those flights, there would have been substantially more cases and substantially more deaths in the United States. So that was well done. On the other hand, something that was not well done is how the federal government rolled out the tests. Right.
The process of rolling out the tests had serious problems, and what happened was the CDC tried to do it all within the federal government. They tried to keep control of it, do it all themselves, and one of the facilities where they were preparing the tests had an issue with contamination, and so the tests were faulty, and it took far too long for the tests to get out there. Now, thankfully, they corrected that over some time, and the decision they made to correct that, the most important decision, is they allowed the private sector to step into the breach. They allowed private labs to step in, the big labs that do lab testing all across the country to step in and begin developing labs. They allowed clinics like the Mayo Clinic and the Cleveland Clinic. They allowed big hospitals to develop labs. And so testing has improved substantially. It's still not as good as it needs to be. It's not as widespread as it needs to be, but it is much, much better today than it was 3 weeks ago. And so that's an area where there has been improvement, but it started out not nearly as good as it should have been.
Senator, what are you hearing from state officials here in Texas as far as medical equipment, masks, gloves, ventilators? Is Texas getting enough?
No, it is a real problem. I've spoken with the governor repeatedly. In terms of fighting this disease, I have urged that we focus on 4 critical priorities.
Number one, testing, that we need to make tests much more widely available and more accurate. We need to develop tests that are accurate for people who are asymptomatic. Right now, the tests are not accurate for people who are asymptomatic. That limits their effectiveness. Number two is what you just asked about, protective gear. Masks and gloves and gowns to keep especially our first responders and our healthcare workers safe, and we don't have nearly enough, and I've laid out specific steps for the government to take to procure those. Number three is critical medical equipment, things like ICU beds and especially ventilators. You know, you look at what's happening in Italy, where that there has been such an outbreak of coronavirus that it's overwhelmed their socialist healthcare system. And in particular, they've run out of the ventilators that are needed to keep people alive who have very, very severe acute cases of COVID-19. And they're making horrifying triage decisions. They have no choice where they have a limited number of ventilators, and so they're deciding which person lives and which person dies. I don't want to see the United States in that situation where our medical system is denying anyone needed life-saving care. And so I've been pressing very hard and laying out specific steps to ensure that we have enough ventilators. And finally, number four, we need to focus on vaccines and treatments and a long-term cure, and I've filed legislation to streamline the FDA process so that we can move much more quickly towards vaccines, a treatment, and a cure.
Senator, I know you're short on time today. I have two more questions that I want to get to you. The first one is about China. How much responsibility do they bear on what we're seeing playing out worldwide?
China bears enormous responsibility. We know for a fact that they lied. They covered up this outbreak when it occurred in Wuhan. For months, they tried to keep it a secret. They punished the whistleblowers. Had we acted swiftly, had we gone in there with doctors with containment units, it is possible we could have contained this virus in Wuhan and not seen it become a global pandemic. But because they were scared that it would make them look bad, the communist government of China instead lied and allowed this virus to get out of hand and to spread, and it has led now to deaths all over the world.
Senator, nearly 10 million Americans out of work in just the last 2 weeks. I know Democrats are already talking about a Phase 4 bill. Republicans have been a little bit more reserved on that. To be completely honest with you, it's hard for me to believe that with at least a month to go on this, we're not going to see another either stimulus package or Phase 4, maybe Phase 5 bill. What are your thoughts on that?
It depends where we are a month from now. We just last week, Congress came together and passed a $2 trillion emergency relief bill. And importantly, I don't call this a stimulus bill. I call it a relief bill.
Right.
Because it is providing much-needed relief to people who are hurting, to people who have lost their jobs through no fault of their own. And it is designed, all of it is designed essentially to serve as a bridge loan to help people get through these challenging times and get to the point where we defeat this pandemic and can get back to work and back to normal. And so if you look at what we passed, the two most important parts of what we passed were, number one, individual relief. Every American, if you make $100,000 or less, you're going to get a check in the mail. If you make $75,000 or less, that check will be for $1,200 per adult, and it will include $500 per child. That means a couple with 3 kids that is earning $150,000 or less is going to get a check for $3,900. That's real money. That's real money for a family that you may have been laid off. You may be worried how you're going to make the rent payment next month, how you're going to put food on the table, how you're going to pay for your daughter's braces. That's designed to be emergency relief for people who are hurting right now. The next most important piece is the small business relief package, and we are seeing millions of small businesses that are closing shop or on the verge of closing shop. Congress appropriated $377 billion in emergency loans for small businesses. These are administered through the Small Business Administration, which in turn is administering it through your local banks and community banks. So if you're a small business owner, if you own a restaurant or a bar or a nail salon or a hardware store or a movie theater, You can go to your regular banker, your community banker, if they're a small business authorized lender. You can get a guaranteed loan up to $10 million. And here's the critical part. If you use that loan to pay salaries for workers, if you use it for rent or mortgage of your business, or if you use it for utilities, that loan is entirely forgivable, 100% forgivable, and that's designed to keep people employed, to keep small businesses, to keep the paycheck coming for employees, so that even if a restaurant is shut down, look, if a restaurant's shut down, you have no customers. As a normal matter, there's no way for you to pay your employees. These emergency loans that are entirely forgivable are designed so that employers can keep the paychecks coming to help the people who are hurting and get us through this economic crisis.
Senator, I know you're short on time today. We do appreciate you carving out some time for us, and we wish you and your family the best of health, and hopefully we'll visit again soon.
Well, thank you, Chad. And let me just say on the way out, I want to thank a few key Lubbock companies. Scarborough Specialties, that's making masks. They've devoted their time to doing that. Wayland Baptist University is making face shields. And Pinkerton's Distillery is making hand sanitizers. And we're seeing that in Lubbock and across Texas and across the country, that companies are stepping up, individuals are stepping up, they're helping our neighbors. And it's that spirit, that's how we're going to get out through this crisis. Texas is strong, and we'll make it through this.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator. Appreciate your time.
Take care. God bless.
That's U.S. Senator Ted Cruz here on the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk, KFYO.